Hello and welcome to Hot Topic. I'm Hugh Riches. This is the last time before the general election that I'll be joined by this programme's most loyal guests, Martin Vickers, Conservative MP for Cleethorpes and Immingham, and Austin Mitchell, Labour MP for Great Grimsby. Martin is standing for re-election. Austin is retiring after 38 years in Parliament. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you very much for coming in. I feel a bit sad that this is the last one.
It's a very sad moment, actually, yeah. I've enjoyed these discussions.
It's been great fun.
Well, let me just insist that you will both be required, whatever the results of the election, to come back every now and then and do this again. Austin, we must start. Last weekend you got into some controversy. There was a quotation or a misquotation or a quotation out of context in The Independent on Sunday in which you were suggesting that any Labour candidate can win Great Grimsby.
Yeah, it's upsetting. I found it very upsetting, actually, and annoying too, because it wasn't a misquotation. I actually did say that, but I said it as a joke, because I'd spent a long time on the telephone explaining to what I thought was a particularly obtuse London journalist that UKIP are not going to win Grimsby, that Labour, Grimsby needs a Labour MP, and I think will be loyal to Labour. And at the end, sort of, I think, impatient of the fact that he didn't seem to understand it. I was saying he should film in Cleethorpes, actually. I should go and see in Cleethorpes, because Cleethorpes is much more marginal than Grimsby. I said, basically, any Labour candidate could win Grimsby. Well, it's not true, of course. We've got a very good Labour candidate. I wouldn't want to say that a paedophile could win Grimsby. It's just nonsense. It was manifestly a joke, should have been taken as a joke, and was not meant for reporting. So, you know, it annoyed and upset me when that joke became the only part of the story. He didn't reproduce any of the other stuff that I'd told him. So I've asked for the right of reply. I don't know whether I shall get it, but
I think we could,
I'm annoyed.
It can be
I must apologise to people.
Well, I think we can recognise it as fairly cruel and shoddy journalism, as not very fair journalism. But was your point that Grimsby needs a Labour member, or that Grimsby will always have a Labour member that you can take?
Who can say always? That would be ridiculous. But I think we're a town that needs development, we need jobs, we need economic expansion, and we're more likely to get all that from the Labour Party. I think, you know, we're a town also, like most places are, but particularly one industry towns, with serious discontent. People are a bit fed up of politics and politicians.
Martin,
and Labour's got to offer them hope.
Martin, would you'd say that any constituency is definitely for one party or for another?
Well, no, I mean, clearly there are some safer seats than others, and the Labour Party have held Grimsby since the end of the war, so clearly it's on paper a safe Labour seat, despite the fact that I think it's, 4 times in my lifetime that the majority has been less than 1,000.
Yep.
Well, last time round for Austin,
yeah,
714.
Twice for Austin, and 101 in 1959, as I recall. So it's always been a fight between Conservative and Labour. I say Labour have held it since the war, but I noticed a forecast that was published last week, which actually put the Conservatives in second place and UKIP in third place, and I suspect UKIP will indeed be in third place. Naturally, I hope for a comeback from the Tories.
Well, Martin was saying that your own seat of Cleethorpes and Immingham is also marginal, and is the threat there a UKIP threat?
Well, the threat from UKIP is that they distort the normal voting patterns. It is a Labour Conservative marginal, and in recent years has gone with the swing. On the present boundaries, which have been enforced since 1997, we had 13 years under the Blair-Brown regime, and I took it in 2010. Obviously, I hope to retain it, but the impact of UKIP, I suspect, will not be on the fact that they could conceivably win the seat, but where will they take their votes from?
Yeah, well, if I could just say, I mean, it used to be the case, and I used to crack when I was a psephologist, I used to joke that people said I'd vote for a pig if my party put him up. But that no longer applies. It doesn't apply anywhere. MPs got to work harder and fight harder, spend more time in the constituency. It's a much tougher job. Well, and I think, you know, we've got to select the best people to do that job.
You bring the absolutely to the point I wanted to come to, because we're now, I get criticised in pubs for quoting Edmund Burke and the fact that you're electing a representative for his judgment and not necessarily just down a party line. But we are growing to that point where the personality, the character of the members of Parliament and the individual is just as important to electors as the party sometimes.
I doubt that. I think primarily they vote for the party.
Yeah.
And they vote for the party on the basic principle of will this serve my interests better than the other side? But it's honestly vote to give an honest curse, defend the bad against far worse.
People are considering two things at a general election, and that is, yes, the local candidate plays some part in their decision, but most people, as Austin says, are choosing, they know that they're choosing the government, and that it is what determines their decision.
Well, just since this is our last chance, I just wanted to ask, what is the role of a Member of Parliament then? Because I don't think either of you would agree that it's just following your party leadership through the lobby and doing and following the party that perhaps your electors voted for. I hope neither of you would agree that it's simply being a sort of jumped-up ombudsman and writing letters to ministers on behalf of your constituents and sitting there in constituency surgeries as people cry on your shoulder, because there are other services that can do that. It's there to be an individual as a representative. I humbly suggest, I don't know, but would you? What would you say is that role?
I don't think anyone could accuse either of Austin and I of being slavish to the party whip. We've both shown an independent streak on both on national, international issues even, and certainly we've defended our local interests where necessary. But it is a national role as well. We are there to scrutinise the government of the country and how they spend our money and their decision making. So it's all of what you describe, but much, much more.
And it's a much harder job than when I came in 38 years ago. I mean, the select committees, for one thing, take a lot of time, and the constituency makes heavier demands. You cannot now have another job. And I think these people who are asking £5,000 a day, two of them, to do other jobs, crackers, it's just unacceptable. But the job is tougher, and I think people look to the MP more. But the MP has also got to be, as I think we've both been, boosters for the constituency. You've got to
ambassadors.
We've got to fight for rail connections, for instance. You've got to try and attract industry. You've got to put its case nationally. I mean, that's why I changed my name to Haddock at one stage, to boost the fishing side of it.
Famous moment, Austin. But
you've got to do a lot more work of that nature and serve the constituency more. Everybody now lives in their constituency or has offices in their constituency. That wasn't the case when I was first elected.
You mentioned the people taking £5,000 a day. We'll come on to the precise numbers in a moment. But the two former Foreign Secretaries, Malcolm Rifkind and Jack Straw, Conservative and Labour, have been rather tricked into revealing that they want lots and lots of money for doing these other things. Now, just staying away from them for a moment, isn't it quite a good thing if members of Parliament have some outside experience of being something other than a politician, and that they can continue doing that while they're still serving in the House of Commons? Austin shakes his head.
There's a time when you can't do another job. You can't do the MP's job properly and have another job. And I think what they were on about, really, that programme upset me because it's simple greed. People want to feather their own nests and greedy, and that gives the whole of politics, and us particularly, a bad reputation.
Well, I mean, I entirely agree with that. But of course, you then get to the tricky problem of how define a second job. The second jobs that they were being touted for was clearly unacceptable. But defining it is much more difficult. Supposing at the age of 25 I had started a business, spent 30 years working in that business, and then been elected to Parliament, but remained a director of that business and drew a director's fee, for example, as recompense for my 30 years' work, attended a board meeting once a month, which would probably be at the weekend. Technically, that is a second job, but it's not taking away any time that I would have devoted to my constituents.
Well, presumably, nor is writing the occasional book. Austin.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, I write quite a lot, but then, you know, I write because I need to know the subjects and I want to talk about them in Parliament. I want to know and be informed on issues. And on that basis, I write. I don't see any damage there, but it is a full-time job and it's hard work.
Let's just ask, Austin, forgive me, I'm going to ask you this one, but why is it that Malcolm Rifkin, Conservative former Foreign Secretary, could command £5,000 to £8,000 per half day, whereas poor old Jack Straw was only asking for £5,000 for a whole day?
Well,
why is it that the Tories
get
so
less
much...
than the minimum wage in a car wash for all I know, but I'm not going to look for another job. I don't want another job. And I think these two people were just greedy. They're asking for more and more money. It's monstrous.
But just as a matter of market economics, why is it that Rifkin was so much more expensive to these specious Chinese people than Straw was?
Well, presumably they felt he had more contacts. I don't know. I mean, either way, it's a ridiculous amount of money for something that probably wouldn't even pay them back.
There is an aspect of, I mean, both of those are elder statesmen, and there is a point of having that experience in politics that will then inevitably be useful in business. How fair is it to take on your political experience into a second, third or fourth career after the House of Commons?
Well, I think there's nothing so X as an ex-MP, actually. I don't think there's an abundance of jobs that people do, and most of the MPs who are reporting, and we're having a series of articles written by them for the House magazine, haven't got second jobs or work for charities and use their political experience that way. So, you know, it's not as if people are dangling offers of thousands of pounds before anybody's eyes. But by the time you retire these days, you are whacked.
Well, we'll go on with that. I don't think anybody goes into British politics to get rich anyway, do they? But, well, you'll know that better than I do as well. We'll have to stop there for the break. Please join us again after this break. Welcome back. I've been talking to Austin Mitchell, Labour MP for Great Grimsby, and Martin Vickers, Conservative MP for Cleethorpes and Immingham. Martin, one point to put to you that's been coming up this month a lot is the matter of the people who are paying for the Conservative Party don't seem to be paying their tax, specifically Lord Fink.
Well, those are the allegations. I mean, I think it's a problem for whoever's in power, actually. Perhaps more so for the Conservatives, because traditionally they've been more pro-business than the Labour Party have. But I think when you're in power, inevitably these people tend to congregate around whoever's in government. I mean, Tony Blair benefited in the same way. The reality is, of course, they want dealing with. The system of HMRC, the legal process, whatever, should be very robust in dealing with them. A lot of people can easily be caught out inadvertently. Let's be honest. If they're in a well-paid job, they get their accountant to deal with their tax affairs, and the accountant does what accountants do, which is to minimise their tax. But if they're found in any way guilty of evasion, then it's a clear criminal offence, and the law should come down very hard on them.
You don't think Lord Fink, the man who I think he runs Boots, doesn't he? That he was aware of his own affairs, or that he just was completely left it to
probably
the
oblivious to it. I don't know. I'd never heard of Lord Fink until about 3 weeks ago.
It is a comedy name, isn't it?
Yes.
Would you not think that the Conservative Party should take the money that it's received from these tax evaders and then just donate it straight to the Treasury as a way of making recompense?
I think that would have to be a decision for all three parties to repay.
Austin, your Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, Ed Balls, has been saying that we should take a receipt for absolutely every expenditure we make.
That was nonsense. It was a mistake. But I mean, there's a culture of tax avoidance, and we have a lot and evasion, and we have the big accountancy houses like PricewaterhouseCoopers selling tax avoidance schemes to firms to tell them how to reduce their tax bill, and the firm then moves its headquarters or its treasury to Luxembourg or to Dublin and dodges its tax obligations in this country. And our calculation is that the difference between what we're getting in tax revenue from big corporations, what we should be getting, is 130 billion of tax evasion. Now, we've got to be tougher on this, and I'm afraid that neither government has been tough enough, because both have wanted to attract wealth and riches and corporations to this country. And the inference of being, we'll give you an easy ride on tax if you come and establish here. And that's got to stop.
Well,
People have got to pay their share.
Are you sure that that 130 billion that the Treasury is losing, that if the tax laws were toughened up and those companies, those businesses did go offshore and went away from this country, that that wouldn't be a greater cost to the economy than the 130
Well, that's not
billion?
true. They'll never do that. I mean, if you take Amazon, for instance, it's got very few staff in Luxembourg, where its headquarters are and where the bills are supposed to come from. It's got about 8,000 staff in this country. All the books are sold here, all the records are sold here, everything it sells is mainly here. And they have a small staff in Luxembourg, and yet they claim they're a Luxembourg company, and therefore they shouldn't pay corporation tax in this country. That is just nonsense. And it's partly due to European rules, and it's partly due to international tax agreements, but it's also due to the weakness and inadequacy of our HMRC, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. If you notice that in this list of tax evaders through the HSBC Bank in Switzerland, which were given to this country, the Lagarde list it's called, there were about 8,000 names on it, but only one has been prosecuted. Whereas in France and in Spain, far more people were prosecuted and they got far more money from their tax evaders, a smaller number of evaders.
Martin, isn't it perhaps the case that the fact that there is such a massive industry trying to help people to pay less tax than they should do, that has become such a vast part of the financial sector? Doesn't that suggest that we're just overtaxed?
Well, I think, yes, I mean, there is an argument for saying we're overtaxed. I mean, Austin says that the governments are doing their best to attract these big multinationals to the country and so on. There's a trade-off, isn't there? Yes, we want those businesses here, and we want the 8,000 people working for Amazon in this country, but governments have got to balance that. They've got to trade off that against what the tax regimes are in competing countries, and I think the evidence is that they have been a bit lax, and certainly HMRC do seem to have too many cosy arrangements with some of these big businesses, and that's got to stop.
There's a bigger tax avoidance industry. It employs far more people, it pays them far better, and it's richer than HMRC. You've got 2,000 people dealing with top tax evasion in HMRC. You've got several thousand more than that devising the schemes to avoid paying the tax in the private sector.
Just on a sort of similar, connected subject, anyone to move on to the economy. This last month and this last quarter of last year, the figures have been coming out in February this last month. And they all seem to be quite good numbers in terms of employment and in terms of production. Austin, this must be a bit irritating for a Labour politician.
Well, no, I think if you keep interest rates at pretty well zero and you start printing £375 billion worth of money, the economy is bound to pick up. They say it's a long-term plan, well, we argued about this last time, a long-term economic plan. It isn't. We've had 4 years of austerity and 4 years of cuts. 4 years of every investment project that was going when they came in were cut. And now they're discovering the need to expand the economy and they're beginning to spend money again. Money they told us they couldn't spend and we had to borrow and we hadn't got. So now they're learning a bit of economic sense. My fear is that they'll go back to austerity after the election. And what they're saying is they will be cutting several billion, 30 billion or whatever it is, out of social security and welfare. And that's going to be terrible in its effects.
Martin, is there a touch of John Maynard Keynes coming in just before the election here?
Well,
for a brief appearance.
There was always going to be, as let's be honest, governments always take their foot off the brake as election approaches, and inevitably, the world was in recession in 2008 onwards. The definition of recession inevitably means that people come out of it feeling that little bit worse off than when they went in. But you're right. All the figures are going in the right way. I mean, employment is up. I mean, the Chancellor's fond of saying we've created 1,000 jobs for every day we've been in power, which is a fantastic achievement. And the Labour Party are up against exactly the same problem. They're wrestling with issues, and Ed Balls is very keen to emphasise how prudent, as Gordon Brown would have said, they're going to be. We will find austerity, whichever government comes in, if you define austerity by meaning spending cut, any future government is going to have to cut back on expenditure.
I think it's 4 years too late, actually. We have 4 wasted years of austerity. And now we've got a situation where the Labour Party, I think, will be more expansive than the Conservative Party, because I think we'll spend more. But we can't say so. And the Conservative Party is splashing out the money on schemes it told us we couldn't afford 4 years back. And we'll take it all back after the election.
But if, if there were to be a Labour Party, an unconstrained by coalition Labour Party, a majority Labour Party government, where would it would spend more, but would that be from greater borrowing or from greater taxation?
Well, we've said that investment will not count against the borrowing total. So we shall borrow to invest, and we shall borrow to build houses. I mean, I think that's the most important stimulus to the economy we could provide. A big house building programme, which doesn't suck in imports and provides a lot of employment. So I think, this talk about getting down the deficit is all premature, really. If you're in a recession, you've got to have a deficit because you've got to expand and stimulate the economy. But I think we shall do it more slowly, but we shall do it quicker than the Conservatives would, that's all.
Well, that's of course that was the Ed Balls line a couple of years ago and so on. And now, of course, he's doing all he can to restrain his spending shadow ministers.
I just want to move on very quickly. One other of the issues that came up in the last election, the Prime Minister, David Cameron, said about immigration that it would be down to under 100,000 people. No ifs, no buts, he said. We find that 298,000 people entered the country last year. That's a big failure, isn't it?
Oh, it was with hindsight, of course, it was a foolish commitment to make, because it was based on a net figure, and you can't govern that. No government can control that. The reality is, once we're in the EU and with unconstrained movement of freedom, movement of labour, we are going to be finding it almost impossible to restrain the numbers. If you look at the non-EU numbers, they have indeed been cut significantly, but I'm afraid once we're in the EU, it is a promise that no government is going to be able to keep.
Well, Austin, the government's failed on immigration. We've got to be able to constrain, to restrict immigrants from Europe in the same way
Absolutely.
as we can from the rest of the world. In other words, we get the skills we want, but not everything else. I mean, one thing they could do straightforwardly and simply, as they do in France and as they do in the United States, classify people coming in as students, not as immigrants, but as students, because they're going to return home. And the Grimsby Institute, for instance, loses about £1 million a year because the number of foreign students coming in has been restricted by this government in its panic about immigration.
It's got to be, the movement of labour has got to be an essential part of any renegotiation.
I think I have to stop the movement of labour right here, I'm afraid, because we've come to the end of the programme. Martin, I can't wish you...
I've just given you a way of increasing your salary.
I can't wish you good luck because I'm impartial and objective, but I hope you enjoy the campaign, and I hope you'll both be coming back.
Absolutely.
That's it for Hot Topic this time round. We've one more normal Hot Topic, and then it's into the election specials. See you then. Bye.